What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the first weekend for the beta for Call of Duty Vanguard on PlayStation is now over, or at least it should be by the time this video goes live. Obviously this is pre-recorded. And in today's video, I wanted to share my feedback after a full weekend of playtime. Now, I played this game a lot over the weekend, I streamed it quite a bit as well, and I was able to experience and discover a lot of things that I wasn't able to experience in the initial feedback video that I gave after about a 2 to 3 hour play session in an early capture event from a week and a half ago. Now in this video, I'm not going to cover the main things that I've already talked about, and in many cases, Sledgehammer has already acknowledged these, and we may see some changes even before next weekend in these areas. And these primary areas are visibility, especially while firing your gun. I did a whole video talking about this. The audio seems to be completely bugged at the moment. Gunfire audio is super muffled. Sometimes a guy can shoot right next to you and you can't even hear him shoot, or you barely hear him shoot. And then footstep audio is essentially non-existent. I will restate this again. I really hope they don't overtune this and make footsteps too loud. But on top of that, we also have spawns. Obviously, the spawns are bad in a beta build of the game. They're going to need to collect a bunch of data on that. I'm sure they have over the weekend. And I'll just wait and see what happens after they have a spawn tuning pass. And then another thing I talked about in yesterday's video is the sprint out times. The sprint out times, in my opinion, are a bit on the slow side, especially combined with the fast time to kill of this game. And I personally would like to see the sprint out times sped up a little bit, especially on those outlier guns that have extremely slow sprint out times, like the M1 Garand and the DP27. So now that we have those out of the way, let's talk about a few new things that I didn't really notice, or I just didn't get enough playtime and experience with before to give proper feedback on. And the first big thing I wanted to talk about today is the suppression effect. I strongly dislike this mechanic, especially in Call of Duty. I think this is better suited to like a milsim or something, not a game like Call of Duty. Essentially what happens with suppression is when an enemy is shooting really close to you, not hitting you, but shooting close to you, it will first up have a visual effect, so it'll kind of distort your vision a little bit, but more importantly, it slows your movement speed down. And this is the part that I strongly disagree with. If they insist on keeping suppression, I'm fine with a visual effect. I can live with that. It's not that big of a deal, especially if it's an LMG and it's like a special trait of an LMG. However, I don't feel there should be a mechanic that rewards people for missing their shots and punishes you for trying to get away from people that are missing their shots against you. That seems completely counterintuitive, and it leads to a lot of frustration in the game. There are so many situations where I see an enemy, maybe I'm out of ammo, I need to get a reload in, and I need to get back behind a piece of cover, but I can't do that because they're shooting near me. One of the most frustrating feelings in a video game is telling your character to do something and not getting a response out of that input. When I enter an input telling my character to do something, and they're unable to do it because of some mysterious mechanic in the background that's rewarding somebody for missing me but shooting somewhere near me, this is extremely frustrating and jarring, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of people that didn't look into this mechanic are having the feeling that they're having crazy packet loss or something's going on the networking end or the performance end because their character isn't responding the way their character should be responding with that particular input. So this is one of those mechanics where it's like, it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay experience. It's not fun to use this against other people. At least I don't think it's fun to use against other people. And instead, all it does is create frustration on their end. So I really hope Sledgehammer will either consider completely removing any sort of movement penalty from suppression and just have it as a visual effect. Or I could also accept this if this was a particular proficiency that was only tied to LMGs and you had to actually use one of your attachment slots in order to gain that proficiency. So there's a trade-off to selecting it. I still wouldn't be particularly happy to be suppressed, but at least I could accept the fact that that person actively chose to use that particular proficiency, and in doing so, they sacrificed the ability to use a different proficiency. Next up, let's talk about something that we didn't have the ability to experience until yesterday in the beta when they increased the level cap, and this is the armor field upgrade. In my opinion, this shouldn't be a field upgrade at all. I could accept it as a score streak in Cold War because that's a score streak, that's a different story. You have to actually sort of earn that, and you have to take up one of your valuable score streak slots. But as a field upgrade, I don't think there's enough of a trade-off to be using this. And second, The recharge rate on this is way too fast. If they insist on keeping armor as a field upgrade, I really hope they reconsider the charge rate and make it a slower charging field upgrade that you only maybe get a couple times throughout a match, rather than maybe even several times in a single life. Like, even when you put an armor plate on and you just placed it on, your next armor plate immediately begins recharging. So before your current armor plate is broken, you can potentially have another armor plate ready to go anyway. And this is the type of thing where, again, I don't think this fits in with Call of Duty. It just makes for inconsistent gunfights, and I really found it frustrating when more and more people were unlocking it in the beta, and it seemed like half the people in my lobby were using it. It just led to a lot of inconsistency from gunfight to gunfight. So ideally, I'd like them to remove it completely. If that's not an option, I hope they will slow down the recharge rate. And on top of this, if it's technically viable, it would be nice if you couldn't recharge your next armor plate until the current one is broken. If that were the case, I could at least maybe accept it. Maybe you wouldn't see a ton of people running around using armor plates, maybe just the odd person here and there. If that were the case, I could live with that. Next up, something specifically that I'd like to ask for the next weekend of the beta is it would be great if you could give us double weapon XP throughout the beta, or maybe even start us off on a higher level, like automatically give us some levels for our weapons so that we can properly play around with and test out the various attachments. Attachments in this game appear to have a massive impact on the weapons, and it's hard to really get a good grasp of things when you're spending most of your time trying to unlock those items rather than actually getting our hands on them so we can use them and give more feedback on these items. Additionally, another piece of feedback specific to the beta here, because it will likely be different at launch and we'll have more control over this for ourselves, I'd really like to see them adjust the map and combat pacing options. I don't know why, but it seems like for the past weekend, I've been getting a lot of Blitz Hotel Royal, which is the smallest map that we have access to currently with the highest player count. And then I would consistently get the larger maps like Red Star and Gavutu with smaller player counts, like the 6v6 modes, for instance. And everything just feels backwards there. It doesn't really leave for a good impression of the game, because in one match, everything's way too chaotic to pay attention to what's going on. And then in the next map, things are so painfully slow and it seems like you're playing hide and seek against people. So I don't know if they did this to collect a bunch of data on specific things, like maybe they need more data on 14v14 Hotel Royal. But for the second weekend of the beta, I would much prefer if they increase the weighting of Blitz-style modes on the larger maps and tactical modes on the smaller maps. I think overall that would lead to a much better experience for people. But moving on to the next thing, and this is something I have discussed in the past, but I still wanted to bring it up now that I've got more playtime with this. I still feel like the radar perk should just be built in for everyone. I don't see how that would make the game any worse. I don't see how that would take away from the gameplay experience. If anything, I think all that would do is it would improve the pacing of the game. And it would eliminate what is very likely going to be a crutch perk. As of right now in the beta, I'm using radar on literally every single one of my 10 class setups. I've seen tons of people asking for this classic minimap to return for quite some time now. I've seen plenty of polls run in the community where it got a lot of responses, like tens of thousands of responses, and the overwhelming majority seem to want the classic minimap just built in for everyone. I don't see a downside to including that, and I see very few comments or very few people that seem to prefer the Modern Warfare style of a minimap. I think building that radar perk in for everyone will do nothing but improve the pacing of the game and improve the general enjoyment of the game. I don't think it makes the game better to force that as a perk. And with that pretty much wraps it up for the main pieces of feedback I wanted to give. These are more of the big picture things that I feel if they're improved, it will significantly improve the overall gameplay. Now I just wanted to rattle off a bunch of little tiny things that I've noticed that I feel could use an adjustment based on my experience. First up, with the field mics, I noticed they have a lot of health. It takes a lot to take out a field mic, and I feel like the HP on that should be reduced pretty considerably. Like, it shouldn't be taking me half a magazine with an assault rifle to take out a field mic. I think 3 to 4 bullets with an assault rifle or SMG seems much more appropriate to be taking one of those out. Also, I noticed with field mics, I don't know if this has to do with the current bugged audio in general, but I don't think they're making any noise. I think you should be able to hear if you are within a radius of a field mic. So it would be nice if it was emitting some form of audio, so if you are close enough to that field mic, you can actually hear that and use that sound to either find out where that field mic is and destroy it, or at the very least, it'll just give you a cue letting you know that you are within the radius of that field mic. Next up, we have the counter UAV. In my opinion, this has too long of a duration. I like counter UAVs, I tend to use them myself, and I really don't like it when you only get like a 20-second duration out of it. But as it is now, it seems like it goes on for at least a minute when you have a counter UAV up. And in my opinion, that's just too long. I think 30 to 40 seconds at most is most appropriate when you're using things like UAVs or counter UAVs. Now, similarly, when it comes to UAVs, this is a fairly minor issue I have, but your team can only have one UAV up at any given time in this game. And I don't necessarily have an issue with that. However, it would be nice to have like a little icon in your heads-up display right next to your UAV once you've earned it. Maybe just a little exclamation mark or something that lets you know that you can't call that in at this moment. I realize that's a fairly minor complaint, and of course you could just look up to your minimap to see if there's a UAV currently sweeping, but I believe this is the first time in Call of Duty where you can't have more than one UAV or spy plane up in the air at a time for your team, and therefore if I look to the bottom right and see that I've got a UAV, I'm just going to be automatically trying to call that in, regardless of whether or not my teammate has a UAV up. So a little indicator there would be great. Or just go back to how it was previously, where you can call in multiple spy planes, and if you have multiple spy planes up, it will first up speed up the frequency of the sweeps on the minimap, and then if you have 3 up at a time for your team, you get an advanced UAV effect. I think that was a great mechanic from previous Call of Duty games, and I don't know why they decided to get rid of that, honestly. But finally, while we're on the topic of kill streaks, I did also just want to restate my preference. One thing I've noticed is, since we went back to kill streaks instead of score streaks, and I'm not talking about Cold War style, I have really noticed a lot of people ignoring objectives. And of course they're going to be doing that. Call of Duty players tend to be quite selfish. We all tend to work on our own individualistic challenges, our own camos, our own weapon leveling, regardless of how much it might harm your team's ability to win the game. In general, Call of Duty players don't care too much about winning the game. They care about their individualistic rewards and incentives, and this is where the score streak system is just far superior in my opinion. So I wanted to take that in at the end here. I'm still really hoping that at launch we will have the ability to choose for ourselves if we want score streaks or kill streaks or a specialist strike package where you can earn perks instead of streaks. And that has been rumored at this point to be coming to the full build of the game. So yeah, Sledgehammer, if you have the ability to do this, it would be amazing to see the option to choose score streaks for those that prefer that. But with that, that wraps it up for my main issues and my main bits of feedback that I wanted to give after the first weekend of the beta. Overall, I had an amazing time with the first weekend. Obviously, we've got some clear issues that need to be resolved, but at this point, most of the issues that I have with this game are pretty surface level. They're things that can be adjusted with relative ease. And if you're able to look past those issues, which are likely to improve significantly over time, I personally think we've got an enjoyable game on our hands. I've seen a lot of people that aren't happy with it, and that's totally fine, but for me at least, I'm having a good time with it so far, and I really think this is going to be a good year of Call of Duty once some of the more obvious issues get worked out. Now, of course, that is just my opinion. I'd like to hear in the comments section below, what did you think of the first weekend of the beta, and what sort of constructive feedback do you have to help improve the game? For those of you that aren't liking it so far, instead of just calling it trash in the comments, I'd like to hear some details from you. Let me know what you don't like about the game and why. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.